This week, a medical special. Professor plugs himself into everything, octopus fights dementia, and a cat does genetics. We are all unique. Every single person on the planet is different, looks different, likes different things, behaves in a different way, even if it's only slightly. The reason? Our genes. Those genes can also decide which diseases each of us may be susceptible to. But of course, for most of history, genetics was unknown territory. This is the Royal Society of Medicine in central London, and this institution has been at the forefront of promoting innovation and the sharing of information throughout the medical community. And in 2003, that community received an explosion of information. The Human Genome Project was declared complete. And this knowledge paved the way for a far deeper understanding of which genes cause which diseases. And these days, the talk is all about personalised medicine. But how useful is this genetic information at the moment? Well, after meeting a leading geneticist in San Francisco, Jane Copestake decided to embark on her own genetic journey of discovery.
If you could unlock all the secrets of your health, how long you would live, what diseases you are at risk of developing, would you? Stanford's genetics department is hoping that this will one day be a reality. It's studying 100 healthy people and sequencing their DNA to see if they can predict when they will get sick before they do. Their health is being closely monitored to see how mutations in their genetic code develop over time and how they're affected by things like colds and viruses. Leading the research is Professor Michael Snyder.
I'm always keeping my devices very well charged.
He's a one-man tracking machine. Along with sequencing his genome, he wears 9 different devices every day to monitor his health outputs, including 3 smartwatches and a radiation monitor.
So I have a continuous glucose monitor here that sits just sitting on top of my skin that continuously measures my glucose levels.
For Professor Snyder, the experiment has already been a success of sorts. He found he had a genetic predisposition to type 2 diabetes, despite showing no typical signs of the condition.
My genome we sequenced and it predicted a number of risks, one of which was type 2 diabetes. And as we're actually doing all these measurements and analyses, what we discovered was that, in fact, my sugar, which had been running along perfectly fine, actually shot off through the roof, if you will, and basically to the point where I was classified as diabetic.
Professor Snyder keeps track of changes in his genome through this personalized system. It looks complex, but it's showing changes happening in his genes every day.
The outside is, in fact, my genome representation of my genome, and all the different changes I have relative to a reference sequence are shown on the inner line here. I do think we'll see a world where all this information will relay into your iPhone, so your smartphone is going to be the nexus, if you will, for your health. This information is all going to show up there, get integrated, and quite frankly, it'll go to your physician as well.
Inspired by Professor Snyder, at home in London, I signed up for 23andMe. It's one of the better known and relatively cheap online services that offers an insight into your genes for £125. The site uses genotyping, so rather than looking at your whole genome, it looks at the parts it's determined are significant using the latest research. Simply send off a saliva sample and in a few months you're left with this. So instead of getting back 3 billion bits of info, I had about 100 results. These included 11 genetic risk factors for serious conditions including Alzheimer's disease and some indicators of hereditary breast and ovarian cancer syndrome. There are also 41 genetic variants that produce different traits from lactose intolerance to eye color to photic sneeze reflex. I was lucky to find out I didn't have anything significant to report. In fact, the most interesting thing that I found out was I was likely lactose intolerant. I've changed my diet accordingly, and it has made a difference to my life. This small discovery increased my appetite for more genetic results. After reading through message boards dedicated to DIY genetics, I discovered a site called Promethease. It said it could unlock more data held by 23andMe for only $5. So I went for it. And rather wished I hadn't. In 10 minutes, I was flooded with information on 20,000 different genomes. These were marked as not set, good, and bad. And whatever this is. Instead of nothing to report, I seemed to have hundreds of bad genes. It looked like I was at a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes and various different cancers. I brought my Promethease results to a clinical geneticist at Guy's Hospital in London, one of the NHS regional centres for genetic research. I'm absolutely baffled by the information that's in this report. Do you find any of this information useful to me?
As a clinical geneticist who would be looking at your risk of disease, I would say there's nothing in here that we'd find clinically actionable in terms of setting up screening or modifying your lifestyle. It may tell you some things about where you are in that spectrum of normality.
Adam explained the percentages that scared me actually showed these genes were fairly common in the general population.
It's also just one genetic aspect out of 3 billion molecules that make up your genome, and that single molecule is not going to change that much about you in this context.
What do you think my GP would say to me if I brought them this?
I think your GP would struggle to find anything in here that they would find useful in managing your health.
A more comprehensive insight into our genes may come from the NHS's 100,000 Genome Project. Participants include patients with rare diseases and their families. The NHS wants this to form the base for a genomic medical service, potentially offering new and more effective treatments and diagnoses. Beyond this, Professor Snyder at Stanford sees a future where everyone's genomes will be sequenced in the womb.
We will enter a world where people will get their genome sequenced before they're born. We're not perfect at this. We're a long ways from perfect. So many times you'll see mutations in genes and you're not sure if they're damaging or not. And that's what makes the business tricky.
While it may be many years before we can access useful information about our genomes cheaply on a smartphone, a future where the individual takes a greater role in their own healthcare seems increasingly possible.
Well, that was Jen, and this is Tony Young, who's the National Clinical Lead for Innovation at NHS England. You're also a surgeon.
That's correct.
What do you make of giving what seems a load of raw genetic data to the public to read through? Because Jen seemed quite freaked out, if I may say, by what she read.
Well, I can understand that, and I think there are more and more of these offerings coming from the private sector around doing some element of your genomic screening. And the big thing is, when you have that data and that information, what do you do with it? What sense can you make of it? And the experience that Jen had was one of very confused. There's an enormous mass of data. But it's not just the public who are confused. Many clinicians as well don't know what to do with large swathes of data coming out. And I think that's one of the reasons in 2012 our Prime Minister launched the 100,000 Genome Project, which was a world first really. It was the largest scale effort that a country had undertaken to that point to screen 100,000 whole genomes for a population, to look at both cancer risk and at rare genetic and inherited disorders, so that we as the NHS would say, there is lots of confusing data starting out there, but actually we're going to take a major first step in this, so not relying on a commercial company to give you some advice on a risk on diabetes or Alzheimer's that may or may not be relevant, but the beauty of the NHS being the largest sort of single healthcare organisation in the history of our planet is we can crack and try and solve some of the big challenges and problems we face, and certainly, genomics is one of them.
We learned very recently that Google is using its DeepMind project, machine learning and artificial intelligence systems, to analyse health data from NHS patients. That's the kind of processing you need to crunch and learn from all this data, I guess, isn't it?
The programme you mentioned with DeepMind and NHS data sets is all around acute kidney injury. So patients who go into hospital and have an altered blood test called a serum creatinine, at very early stages of that, you're still very well and your kidneys are very well, but slowly that can deteriorate over time. But you're waiting for a human to go and look at that blood test result, a junior doctor or a nurse or someone else to go and do it. The whole point of using machine learning and artificial intelligence is, can we use this to actually pick that up much earlier to prevent that person getting kidney damage and renal failure? The data is there, but we're just not using it. So we can deliver safer, better care. I think it's really exciting. And we have one of the biggest, best, richest data sets. But it's how we do that, how we keep that safe, how we keep that secure. We have a national data guardian that's been appointed to make sure that those things go forward and it's done. And all data is encrypted, so no patient identifiable data is shared in these things. And it's only the clinician who can know it's their patient in front of them with that data, and that's the key thing.
Tony Young, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the Week in Tech. I would love to say it was the week that the inventor of Bitcoin was finally unmasked. After years of speculation, Australian Dr. Craig Wright claimed to offer proof to 3 media outlets, including the BBC, that he was Satoshi Nakamoto, the mysterious inventor of the cryptocurrency. That is, until lots of people said he hadn't. Now, he's backed out from providing the further evidence he says would confirm his claim, saying sorry and goodbye. And IBM made a functioning quantum processor available to the public online. Many believe quantum computing will pave the way for next-gen machines, capable of much faster calculations than those of today. And, scared of going under the knife? Well, have no fear, RoboSurgeon is here. Researchers at Children's National and Johns Hopkins University in America have built a system that can autonomously sew soft tissue. Having successfully operated on a live pig's intestine, they say it could be safer and more precise than a human surgeon. And the winner for the Tech PR Stunt of the Week award goes to Catterbox.
Have you washed your hands?
Sick of cats sounding like cats, the custom collar apparently mixes meows with various phrases,
I'll have this one.
giving would-be purring felines a human voice.
This is rather fun.
Wow, how perfectly pointless.